Right, I'd like to welcome all teams to round one of Novice 2017. On the motion that this House would ban all displays of animals for entertainment, to call upon the Prime Minister. Yeah.
Just a minute. We think the fact that animals are mistreated in a way that they are unable to express themselves when they feel pain or when they're subjected to some level of pain, and the fact they are unable to express themselves to the point in which government is able to take meaningful steps to stop this kind of egregious behavior. We think it's abhorrent, and the fact that they can't actually express themselves means it's better for us to leave them alone in their natural habitat. What do we say on side government? We think on our side, we're okay with leaving these animals in their natural habitat where they've learned to adapt as a result of DNA transmission, or they inherit from their parents, right? So they've learned to adapt to that very environment. They've learned to find their foods and hunt for animals. They've also learned to survive in this kind of environment. So what's our mechanism? Basically, we are going to close all zoos, parks, circus, and safaris, and that displays animals as a form of entertainment. Secondly, we're also going to ban any kind of hunting game that endangers this animal, because it's also a form of entertainment which people do. Good.
Would you also ban, say, the poultry industry, which is also known for being egregious in terms of its treatment of animals?
Good. So basically, there are two responses to that. One, this debate is about entertainment, but secondly, poultry animals that are kept in the poultry are kept for food purpose, which is a necessity. However, entertainment on the other side is luxury, which you can always opt out from. Good. Second, okay, yeah, good. So we think like the mistreatment, like these animals are subjected to a level of mistreatment that they're unable to report because they do not have the ability to tell government what they've been subjected to. Secondly, we think this entertainment industry are for profit. They're always there to make profit, just like they treat labor, right? They're always gonna be happy when you reduce the wage of labor. So we think they're always happy to put these animals in the most worst abhorrent condition possible, in as much as it increases their profit. So we think the fact that it's a for-profit organization and they do not have the incentive to treat this animal properly, we think it's justified for us to ban them. Now, two things I'm going to talk about in my debate. One, the principal justification for this. But secondly, how we're able to protect endangered species and why the natural habitat is the best for them. So we think animals, to some extent, to a large extent, sorry, have the ability, they have consciousness and they can feel pain. And that consciousness is the ability to know what is going around the environment, their awareness that they do have about what's going on around them. So, for example, if you see a lion wouldn't just walk into the fire because it understands what fire signifies in the grassland. So they understand what pain is and what their consciousness is. So this means we have to understand that there's a comparison in human rights is based on consciousness, right? The ability for you to be aware, your awareness of what's going around you, and your ability to also feel pain and report this pain. So insofar as animals as well feel pain and they are conscious of the fact of what's going on around the environment, it's justified for us to grant them some level of rights in which they're able to live a decent life. So we think that's the most important thing in this debate. Secondly, we think government is not able to regulate properly. The government doesn't have the ability to regulate properly the kind of condition you subject these animals to. Because one, in the case of a human being can always report to the police when they're subjected to to a horrific condition. But animals do not have that right. And even if you're going to talk about government inspection, we don't think that's going to be the case because one, the moment the zoo or the safari knows government is going to inspect them, they would put good condition that would ensure that their license is properly renewed. So we think government do not have the ability to actually ensure that these animals are well protected in safaris or in zoo. So we think animals do not have the ability. Secondly, we think animals do not also have the ability to opt out in these entertainment things, right? Because even if they're feeling pains, right? Sorry. Yeah, even if they're feeling pain, they do not have the ability to opt out. Even if they're feeling pain, we think the pain is what actually rises up the audience, like people who are there. If a bull actually mows, for instance, that's what makes them feel happy. So even if they're feeling pain, they do not have the ability to tell human beings, look, I'm feeling pain and I can't opt out of this very scenario. So we think it's to some extent the way they express themselves doesn't allow you to it doesn't give you the ability to actually opt out of this kind of policy. Now, so we think in a world in which animals are subjected to this kind of horrific treatment, the best thing you can do for these animals is to actually free them into the wild and let them live a decent life in the habitat that they have been in the habitat that they've learned to adapt and survive in. Now, what government, the comparative here, okay, go.
So in regards to regulation, like organizations like PETA and the World Wildlife Fund are also known for carrying out things like incognito and undercover operations to ensure that animal rights are ensured. Why can't this happen in the world? Why can't increased efforts like this happen in this world?
So let's talk about a zoo or safari. So basically what they're going to do to you is, look, this is our zoo, you can't use camera, or this is our zoo, there's a limit to which you can actually approach these animals. And they actually have the ability, because they're a private organization, they have the ability to limit the access you have to these animals. So even if these animals are in bad conditions, they would actually prevent you from getting access to these animals before you can even report it to the outside world. So we do not think those organizations are going to do a great job. So how are we able to protect animals from endangered species? We think animals have been endangered as a result of human activities such as hunting, such as capturing these animals for what you call entertainment purposes. But the moment in which you stop that, the moment in which you try to rehabilitate them, allow them to live a life in which they're able to decently determine what goes on in their own society, in their own community, the animal community. So that's where we think the natural habitat is the best for these animals, because like I told you before, one, they have the ability to survive and adapt into this environment. But secondly, so we think the natural habitat is the best habitat for them, and when it comes to issues of zoos and safari park, we don't think that's necessarily the best habitat, because these organizations are always going to give them supplements of food that are going to ensure that they bring the maximum kind of profit to them, right? So we do not think they would actually be in the best interest of this animal with all this we're about to propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. To continue the debate, we welcome the leader of opposition.
So, ladies and gentlemen, so the motion for today is this House will ban all displays of animals for entertainment such as zoos, safaris, circus, etc. Okay, so what the opening government has said earlier is that we should let these animals go into their natural habitat because that is where they belong. But also what the opening government, the Prime Minister pointed out earlier is they clearly pointed out their flaws, which is the government cannot regulate this properly, okay? Because the government does not have the ability to ensure all animals are well taken care of. So this is where the government should come into the picture to train more zookeepers, okay? Hire more zookeepers with a better background of education that knows in depth about certain kinds of all types of species of animals, or maybe what they major into the field that is related to animals, so that this way when they were to be in charge, take care of the zoos or the safaris or whatever, they know what is the problem that's going on with these animals. If these animals, it is okay, some people will portray zoos or safaris or any kind of this place, they would portray that these animals are being kept caged behind jail bars, and they are being separated from their family. They are depressed. Their health care are not well taken care of because there are just too many animals in the zoos. Well, you can change that, okay? It is something that can be changed for the betterment for these animals because they too have rights. I don't deny that the animals have rights. So this is where you should take into account and provide better place for them to live, okay? A more suitable environment situation for them to survive, so that these animals, they don't feel depressed or somehow one day they just die out of the blue because they don't feel good where they are, okay? Yes?
Even if you can cater to all of these animals' needs, why is the entertainment for humans more important than the freedom of these animals?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part.
Even if you can cater to all of the animals' needs, why is the entertainment of humans more important than the freedom of animals?
Okay, this entertainment of humans, I'm not saying that it is more important than this rights for the rights of animals, because entertainment for humans, okay, entertainment, they have a broad definition, but I'm just going to narrow it into what we believe in, because zoos, safaris, etc., they can be beneficial to society because it can be educational. Because, okay, when I say educational, people would generally think like, okay, school trip to the zoos, yes, see lions, you can see lions, you can see penguins or giraffe or things like that, or animals like that. Okay, wait, sorry, no, thank you. So, okay, this educational things, it's like the society doesn't just see animals through the TV, but they can also witness it live. Okay, they can go to zoos or safaris, but at the same time, these zoos and safaris, they need to be upgraded to cater to what these animals really need. Okay, no, thank you. Okay, so this zoos, safaris, what they are trying their best to maintain the what do you call that? To maintain the animals' needs, basic needs. Okay, so they're not just providing basic needs for the animals, but they are trying their best to take care of the animals and put themselves into the shoes of the position that the animals are in. Okay, so that is why suitable conditions should be provided for these animals, so that, okay, and also at the same time, some people would see this entertainment a profitable business, so that they could, no thank you, sorry, no thank you, a profitable business that profits humans. So we use these animals, abuse them for entertainment purposes, but no, okay. When we talk about entertainment, like I say, it has a very broad definition. So the profit, if they were to gain profit from zoo tickets, entrance, things like that, this profit will benefit back to the animals either way, okay? Because, okay, do you think it's free to, no thank you, let me finish. Okay, do you think it's free to provide, to buy animal food and then to sustain the cleanliness of the place that they're in? So this is where the profit will be channeled to. Okay, it's not just for the profit for these people, for what they call a business. Okay, no, it's something to profit back to the animals, and also at the same time for the society to benefit as well in the educational term. Before that, yes.
So can you give us a reason that human entertainment has to be based on animals in captivity?
Sorry.
Can you give us a reason why human entertainment should be based on animals in captivity?
Okay, reason why entertainment should be animals in captive, right? So, okay, these animals, why do you want to, rather than, you say that these animals are being kept captive behind cage, so why is it a source of entertainment for us? Like I said, it's for educational purposes as well. And also when we upgrade the zoos and other things similar to that, okay, we're not going to make a small concrete compound for them to stay in. We're going to make it larger, so we're going to need a larger space for them to be comfortable, as large as you think is appropriate for this animal to live and then survive. And imagine if you let it go into the natural habitat, if they are even endangered species, okay, it is true that you may have other alternatives to solve this, but if you were to let them into the wild, okay, what happens is, number one, the possible of them getting killed is very high as well, okay, and number two, when you let them into the wild, okay, the stability, the balancing of the diversity of animal species might differ. The ratio might have a big gap, because some animals they are prone to be eaten by other animals. Okay, so the possibility of tigers and lions the possibility for the other strong animals to eat these weaker animals are higher as well. So this is why the opposition leader, this is why we oppose this motion. With that, thank you.
Thank leader of opposition for that speech. Let's call for the EPA.
The same principle that we use is where we talk about like not allowing certain humans when they do entertainment, when we say when there is pain in that form of entertainment, like BDSM, like football players going to a match, right? The difference here is that they are allowed to opt out, they are allowed to consent, right? Basically, so we tell them to either sign a contract or whatsoever for them to actually like show that they consented to that pain and like allow that for actually entertainment. Here we show to you that animals are not able to do that. They are not able to tell like people like us, you know, like I don't want this anymore. I don't want to be paraded anymore, or like forced to swim around just for human entertainment. We tell you like what's the similarity here. The similarity between humans right now and the animals that I was talking about is basically their ability to have consciousness, their ability to feel pain. When we tell you like we respect, and when we see other humans are like in pain, we don't think that that's the right thing to do. Right, we think that that's wrong. What we're proposing here is to just basically extend that to animals, because we see that when elephants when elephants are poked around or like forced, they don't want to eat anymore because they feel the form of pain that they've suffered in the zoos and so forth. We're just extending this whole thing because we see that sometimes when we see like other beings as the same level as humans, having the same levels of consciousness as humans, then we should extend the same rights that we have to them as well. It's like the whole proposal of like extending the rights of apes, extending the rights of humans towards apes and so forth, because they are of a higher being. But we tell you that we don't like have all the rights to these animals as well. Later on, I'll explain. Right. So then, please sit down. So we also tell you like, let me just like address something. They just now POI us about how like in terms of poultry and in terms of food, we tell you that firstly, like okay, we can improve the circumstances. If they do mistreat these cows or chickens really that bad, then we tell them that we have laws in place to actually protect them. Secondly, we talk to you about food. The food means that it means in terms of killing them. So when we kill them, that means that they don't have conscious anymore, right? That means that we no longer like see them as somebody like a being because they're dead. So we tell you that's the end of that. So then let's first rebut and see what the Ella has said. She talks about like how this mistreatment of animals can actually just be like suddenly repaired by just putting in bigger zoos or having better care. We tell you that that's not the problem. We tell you even if your zoo is tip top, if it's at the best, like at the best level itself, it doesn't abuse animals, it treats animals like super like awesome, then we tell you that there's still the problem, because the problem is in the fact is of them being unable to consent. It's the fact that they're being seen as an entertainment. That means that we instantly degrade them to a lesser being. That's what we don't want. She also tells you, secondly, that it's educational for purposes. It's so that school children will probably come to the zoos and learn about it. That's the only way for them to like familiarize with them. We don't think that that's necessary. Like even if I don't see a penguin my entire life, I probably still give it money, right? Because I just like have a decency of a human being to want to donate to animals. We tell you that there's such things as National Geographic or Planet Earth for them to actually be able to see animals and stuff. So you don't need like for them to actually have zoos, for them to have safaris, for you to actually be educated about animals and so forth. She also tells you about how like money, and I've already told you that normally a decent human being would still like even if you don't know a person having cancer, you probably still donate to him because you know he's in pain and he needs that money and so forth. We think that same principle could be applied. So then what was like my parents speaking up a bit just now, because I feel like it was kind of ignored. We told you that because they face the same conscious, that means that we recognize them as conscious beings. That means that we do extend more rights to them because we don't want to treat them as a lesser being. Yes?
If regulation is not at all possible, would you then be also principally against any form of animal testing by pharmaceutical companies?
Yes. We would, because we tell you that the main point here is as long as they can feel the pain, right? That means that we don't want that to like, as long as they feel the pain, we don't consent to it. It's like the same thing with humans. So what? You're just gonna draw a line and allow human testing now because it's for the benefit? We don't think so, right? So then what's my first point? Firstly is how do we actually make people like respect the rights of animals? Because we can see that most of the time people, it's not like you say that going to the zoos and going to safaris is for them to learn about animals, and it's the only way for them to actually learn how to treat animals properly and not to abuse them. We don't think that is basically working. We think that the reason for this is because they're still shown as entertainment, right? When you're shown as an entertainment, it's kind of like, and you're shown as an entertainment and you are unable to opt out, it's kind of in a degrading situation. What I mean like this is like when long before when we had African Americans placed in like European zoos. So when they're placed in these kinds of zoos, these European people, when they came to these zoos, they saw them as a lower being because they were actually shown to be like as a form of entertainment and are unable to consent out of it, right? So that means that we still like basically we just still prove to people that they are still secondary, that these animals are still secondary beings compared to humans. So the best way for us to actually be consistent is to show that they are not supposed to like be a form of entertainment itself, right? It is degrading, and like to show that they are not supposed to not only have rights if they are like a form of entertainment or cute, because that's the main thing with zoos itself, is that the only way for us to attract people is if these animals are cute or are well known. We don't want that to be like the line that we draw, like only if they're cute, only if they're attractive do you want to give rights or protect them. We want this to be for all animals. That's why you have to place a bigger principle here to actually protect all forms of animals, like without caring about this disparity, like in terms of the like looks of the animals. Yes.
Are you okay with people keeping pets because they derive some degree of entertainment out of these animals that they keep?
First of all, these animals, they're normally not the ones taken from, they're normally like, how is it docile? They're normally like dogs or cats. They're different, right? They're normally not taken from like outside, like nature. They're not from like normally the jungle, and they're normally okay, and they don't normally feel pain when they're with humans or they're in homes. Actually, they're normally happier and actually treated, and it's actually the best form of them to live. The animals that we're talking about here are the ones who are endangered normally, right? Penguins and so forth, who need to live, who like are not supposed to be bred in zoos. Because we tell you that here, the problem with zoos and safaris, a bigger problem is that they're only normally for profit. That means that they need to sell the tickets in order for them to survive. That means that they'll do anything that they can to actually gain attention. It's like the water park, I forgot what it's called, but the one with the okras program, right? Like they still, even though despite criticism and a lot of people protesting against the okras breeding program, they still have it because they feel like they needed to get that profit. They needed to get that attention. That means they don't care about if they're still abusing animals. Thank you.
Thank the DPA for that speech. Let's call upon Guillermo. Here.
Thank you, sir. So first of all, this debate is about how would ban all displays of animal for entertainment. So the first of all, we are totally opposed this motion. We are totally opposed this motion that we should not ban all displays of animals for entertainment. Why do we say so? First, because some media has manipulated, has exaggerating the news that the zoo is operating like this. They are not well trained. They are abusing the animals, but actually it is not. So I will explain that later. And like second point is, I will talk about it's like those animals that we capture in zoo or is well taken care, because if we keep the animals in the zoo in the proper place, we can keep updated on which animal that needs our attention more, in which species that it's endangered. So we can that we can create new we can create new invention how to breed a better species and how to make a colonization of the species. So based on what has been said by the government team, let me finish first. Thank you. Okay, you see just now, like we need to provide the animals a natural habitat, even if even it is locked up, even the animals are locked up in a proper place. We put in the environment that they are naturally live in, like how they live in the jungle. That's how we put it at the zoo as well. So yes, and you said just now that the animal will feel pain and the animal should not be treated that way. I'm sorry again, sir, but then the animals it's not the animals. The zookeepers that are going to take care of them is properly trained and I'm sorry, let me finish first. It's like they have proper trainings, and it's not something that they can easily handle. It's like if you can't handle it, like we are not giving you the duty to take care of the animals. All right. So as a second, government said that we are degrading the animals, and even the tip-top zoos cannot cannot solve the problem that the animals are suffering in the zoo. And you said that it is not important at all for education purposes. I mean, again, can you imagine, like, you cannot say that it is not important at all, because can you imagine something that you cannot imagine an elephant without have to visualize, without have to look it live on what is elephant is actually is. So my first point, I would like to go back on my first point is this how would ban all this piece of animal for entertainment, because the problem is the media. The media is exaggerating the news. The animals that has been they're not dying every day. I mean like it is a rare case that some animals were abused, were treated unequally as.
So some zoos and natural parks keeps animal in cage or in secluded areas. So animals like elephants, that are very social animals,
Yeah.
how are they supposed to thrive in such kind of environment?
All right. Okay. Thank you for the questions. We are not easily caught an elephant and put it in a cage just because we think that that's the way we can keep them. There's always a reason behind it. I mean, like, let's say we quarantine certain animals, we put it in a cage, maybe because they are ill, they have diseases that are contagious, so it might affect other animals as well. So in order to avoid greater evil, so I think it is better if we quarantine some animals that need to be quarantined because they are very contagious, they spread diseases. So it's in a way, like when there is specialized or certain things, we have extra care for them. I mean, the zookeepers will give extra attention to those animals, but because we put an animal in a cage, maybe for some reasons, maybe because they are ill and they have to be separated from other animals as well. Okay, let's say we give an example in Malaysia. Even in Malaysia, like, we have a relationship with China. We keep the panda here. All right. So you say that we are not giving them a proper environment and not something that it is in natural habitat. But the panda is giving birth. I think I'm not sure if it's this year or last year. So it's like we provide them comfortable place that they can breathe. So it is an example that we have done a good thing for animals. We are not abusing them. All right. So for education purposes, it is beneficial for us. The zoo is not just for entertainment. I mean, it is for entertainment, but it is for educational purposes. I mean, it is beneficial for everyone. I mean, for the kids and everything. It's like the kids will know how to handle the animals and how to. And even if the kids or the adults do not know how to handle the animal, the zookeepers always tell you how to do it, how to handle. And even if they can't handle it, the zookeeper will always tell, okay, never mind, I will teach you how. So there is a proper guidance on how to treat them right. So we are not abusing them like how you see it just now. So I think this how would not ban all these plays for animal for entertainment, because media is exaggerating the news, and we capture the animals in zoo because we can update it on which animal we can take, who needs our attention more. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Pierre, for that speech. We need the action in the closing house. Member of government. Yes.
You see, the ability for animals to adapt is a completely different from humans itself. Humans have ways to adapt. They have many platforms that support them to adapt, whereas animals, it's hard for them to adapt. And that's why we on site closing government believe that there's no way you can justify taking an animal out of its natural habitat and make them adapt to your climates just so you can put them up for entertainment, right? So before I start my speech, I'd like to make a few rebuttals to a site opening opposition, right? So first, site opening opposition came and talked about how you're going to lock up animals, and these animals will be locked up in really good habitats and will take care of them really well. But that's a problem in today's society, right? The word lockup is never good for anything at all. When you hear the word lockup, usually associated with something bad, like you lock up a prisoner, you lock up someone bad. And that's why we think that when you lock up animal, no matter how good the habitat is, there is no way you can lock up an animal as you're taking away the freedom the animal gets, right? And you're limiting what the animal can get. And in the words that you say, you have a good habitat and you're able to reincarnate that habitat, right? We believe in site closing government, there's no way a habitat can properly reincarnate it, for a reason being, in an animal's natural habitat, they have the space that humans cannot give these animals, right? These natural habitats have other species for them to interact with and other food supplies, right? Whereas when you take them to a habitat like this, you aren't able to provide them the exact same habitat they can, and that's why that case fails. Furthermore, talk about how that they concede to the fact of certain rare cases where animals die, right? And that's the problem in today's society right now. We do not want that in society today. That rare cases, we believe that should never happen and it should not be our fault, right? Because the problem right now is you're putting the burden of animals' death onto the shoulders of us human beings, right? And that is not the case that you should do in status quo today. In status quo today, these animals, right, should never be blamed for death because of a human being. And that's why we believe that if you do it under your side, right, these animals should never die because the human treats them unfairly, right? And furthermore, site opening opposition talked about how that we as humans need to interact with them live in order to feel these animals, to understand these animals, right? First off, what is there in an animal that we cannot get on the internet right now? Even you say the fact that we concede the fact that yes, you are able to look at these animals. The problem is to what extent do you not limit these human interactions, right? Site opening opposition came up with the entire perspective, the whole wrong idea that human interaction will always be good and there will be no harms or backdraws towards these human interactions, right? But we believe that's totally not the case. No matter what in history today, human interaction never leaves a good footprint in any part of nature today. Whenever a human goes, there will be bound to be some kind of negative result towards this, such as, for instance, in status quo today, many humans right now go to zoo safaris, even though we're told to have no flashes on the camera, they do take pictures of them with flash, right? This, even though it may sound kind of minor case, but it's truly a very bad thing for these animals to experience. For once, they're not used to having lights flash at them just because they're held up for entertainment purposes, right? And because into the limit where you do threaten the animal and start to make these animals question where they are, it's already it really shows how bad human interaction can be toward one animal or another, right? So we believe that human interactions should never exist to the point where you are spoiling the animal's whole concept of life, and your human interactions hinder the lives of these animals, right? So back to my points and my speech, right? So first off in my speech, I've talked to you about how the ability to adapt from animal and human is completely different, right? As I told you, humans are able to adapt, and when they migrate countries, for example, really well because they have different platforms like their friends or families, or they're able to communicate to other people over there, or may even be able to Google ways in order to help adapt to their environment, right? But when you take an animal out of its natural habitat and they believe that these animals will be able to adapt in whatever habitat you do provide them, right? We believe this is entirely very hard, and for the following reasons, right? First one, for example, you gave on how pandas are moved into Malaysia, right? You got to consider the fact that the climate they are moved into is entirely different, right? You don't have the natural bamboo, you don't have the natural climate atmosphere that China does, right? You don't have the exact temperatures and climates that these pandas are really adapted to, right? And we know that for a fact that you talked about how these animals will then be sick, and the reason we do that was we'll bring them over so they can cure them, right? And the problem is that when animals adapt, when you're born into another habitat, when they are not adapted to, the immunity towards diseases in a certain place, a certain area will go away, right? These animals tend to will fall sick worse, or will not be, and in worst case scenarios where the animals aren't able to adapt, right? The amount of negativity and drawback towards these animals will be humongous, right? As the illness they fall into will be way worse than the natural habitats where they've already adapted to, right? And furthermore, when you move these animals into areas that they haven't adapted to, for instance, the way they get their food, right? You're completely changing their entire lives. Like, can you imagine a human not being able to get the food the normally way you deserve, food on your plate? Because instead of animals being able to find food themselves, right? You're taking away the entire animal instinct, the entire word to call an animal is, because when you look at an animal, usually associated with like the wild, and where these animals have the instinct to be able to get their own food, right? So when you throw them into an environment like zoos or safaris, where the responsibility to find food we then put on the human shoulders, we find it entirely harmful towards these animals, as then these animals will never be able to hone their animal instincts and then animal hunting skills, and then they'll be thrown into a world where they will then have to rely on human beings to find food. So what are problems with this, right? So first of all, when an animal feels like they cannot adapt to a certain place, they will feel alienated, right? And when someone or anything feels alienated, they tend to feel threatened, and they tend to feel suspicious of what their surroundings are. And that is what we don't want in today's society, right? We don't want these, we want to give these animals that, right? We want to give these animals that comfort, right? We don't want to take them out of their habitat and make them feel alienated and threatened, right? This goes against the whole concept, the whole moral of being human, right? We don't think that that is something you should do. And lastly, you can never argue the fact that these animals, we bring them to zoos or we take care of them because we can take care of them better than they can in the wild, right? Animals have existed for billions and billions of years, well enough themselves. They are managed to adapt, they managed to evolve, right? And then humans come into play, and the humans is the problem right now. Because when humans are the problem, they come in, they take away the balance of the entire ecosystems, right? Ecosystems exist for a reason, and it's because they are able to sustain themselves, right? And when you put human into the whole picture, you are only merely ruining this whole entire endurance that these animals will be able to get amongst their existence, right? So, to summarize what I talked to you in today's speech, I'm going to talk to you about why side opening opposition's case entirely fails due to the entire distorted image on the entire world and their ways on how zoos are held. And I'll talk to you about how the ability for animals to adapt is way worse, and it's will always be subpar towards humans' ability to adapt. I've also managed to talk to you about how animals should never be seen as a type of species that will never be able to survive on its own, as it has survived for long enough without the help of human beings. And with that, I'm proud to propose.
Thank you, Member of Government, for that speech, followed by the Member of Opposition.
Is it streaming?
Panel, in a world where individuals are growingly becoming far more indifferent towards animal efforts, zoos and safaris are the last remaining pillars that ensure these issues retain some semblance of relevance in the world that we live in today, translating to benefits that directly help animals, but also humanity as a whole. In my speech, I'm going to do many things that are different from opening opposition. Firstly, I'm going to explain what constitutes a ban and what does not allow a ban and what you need to justify in order to get a ban at the end of the day. I'm going to respond a lot to what opening government said and directly engaging with the extension that came out from closing government, right? And I'll posit two new things. Firstly, on how you better long-run sustainability and awareness of animals, but secondly, you also facilitate scientific procedures, right? Before that, a couple of responses to a lot of ludicrous things that came out from opening government. Firstly, on this idea of how you cannot ever have increased regulation, right? Much pointed out, much likely that I pointed out in my POI earlier, increased things such as incognito and undercover operations exist right now in organizations like PETA, who have a direct incentive to ensure that these animals are not targeted unfairly in status quo, right? So we're more than likely and more than happy to support these efforts in status quo. We are happy that these things happen, right? Also, recognize that zoos and safaris are not inherently evil organizations or like entities, right? They also have overarching like societal purposes that they fulfill that I'll highlight later on in my speech, right? Second response on this whole idea of how they responded to my POI earlier about animal testing. I think this is completely harmful for multitudinous reasons. Let me run you through the current pharmaceutical setup, right? How you have clinical trials that have to establish things like lethal dosage and toxic dosage for a lot of medications in order for people at the end of the day to test this out. Inside government's world, what you have is the inability for individuals to have access to any kind of advanced medications for things like AIDS and cancer. So in their world, they are willing to prioritize
stigmatize animals just because of the metric that they do not fulfill consent, right? We think that is abhorrent. We're not willing to support that. Thirdly, on the idea of SeaWorld, which is what they wanted to talk about before us, right? And how SeaWorld is inherently horrible. I'll point out later why SeaWorld is a also good organization that fulfills and facilitates a lot of advancements. Fourth, on this whole idea of how pets are not like principally in line with what they're saying, notice that the metric they talked about was that pets like dogs and cats are docile, while the other animals are wild, which means that they are okay with things like dog. I don't know what they call like pet competitions. No, thank you. Like, so those are also in principle things that they have to be against. So like it being docile or wild does not like engage, right? Lastly, directly contending with the extension that came out from closing government, right? This whole idea of adaptability of animals, right? Firstly, I think it was slightly convoluted. It was really hard for me to listen to the extension. But the only exclusive harm that I got from them is that animals feel alienated, which means in principle, they should also be against any animals that are transported from some areas of nations to other nations for scientific endeavors. And I'll tell you why this directly contends with my extension and why that's horrible, and you have like a horrible world to live in for people, right? Before I move on, any? Cool. Long-run sustainability and how you better it. Context for the world that we live in right now. Recognize the world we live in right now, people are horribly indifferent towards animal issues. So like, even if PETA floods the videos of like viscerally engaging material online, you have people ridiculing it, not buying into it because there's increased desensitization. Secondly, you also don't have an incentive. Like people don't have a natural incentive to want to learn about animals because there are other pressing issues in their life. So things like zoos and safaris make it far more better and far more accessible for individuals, right? How do we make it better in our side? Because recognize, in our world, at the very least, right, you have funding to ensure there is long-term sustainability, thank you, for like long-term preservation of the ecosystem, right? The principle on their side is that you harm animals and so there's no consent. That's wrong. The principle on our side is that this like trade-off that we're trading off animals and consent right now is fine because at the very least in the long run, you don't have permanent damage, or at least you don't have an escalating, alarming rate of permanent damage of the ecosystem, right? Before I move on, closing.
Explain why the needs to acknowledge for animals should be more pressing matters towards society today.
I can give you multiple reasons. Like the more we know about animals, the more we're able to cater to these particular animals. The more we know about animals, the more likely we are to find scientific breakthroughs. There are a lot of benefits. I'll talk about that in my second extension as well, right? So I'll cover my extension right now, right?
specific spirit of mind, they ensure that nationalization applicable species, and they let them go the environment, like do something, you have to back backwards, make sure you don't stop the damage is here as well. Thank you, right? The second thing, and the nuance is very important, the new nuance coming out of closing, is understand what the other countries do with it, and like countries in the African continent, the Asian continent, and how they have like economies that are solely reliant on things like safaris, solely reliant on things like zoos, right? So countries like South Africa, under their world, are no longer going to have zoos and safaris, which means individuals in the Euro region who are very rich and affluent have less of an incentive to care about, less of an incentive to care about, no thank you, African countries, right? So what is the outcome of this, right? Recognize for like developing countries and restructuring economies, you need to have some degree of financial stability in the short run, let alone in the long run to have like long-term policy planning, like things like monetary policies and financial policies for you to predict the economy is very important so that you can do things, you can allocate funds for welfare, allocate funds for just general like infrastructure betterment in society, right? That's the nuance that's coming up from our side, from closing, and it directly engages with them because in their world, they don't have any of these benefits. They will allow these stations that are solely reliant on tourists like and safaris to like falter, right? Secondly, on the idea of facilitation of scientific procedures, very quickly, right? The thing about zoos is that it makes it easier for people like marine biologists and scientists to come and congregate in one area and have joint journals and joint researches. This is very important because the comparative in their world is they make it much harder for individuals who are inclined to want to cultivate their passion in a particular field and actually get tangible reports out of it, which we can directly translate the benefits for like conservation efforts that are far more efficient, right?
In the comparative, they don't have these things. That means scientists have to opt into far more expensive procedures to get access to these animals. They are less incentivized to care about these animals. You don't have any benefits, right? Recognize all the positive contributions that came out from government branches to justify better regulation. There was limited engagement on why entertainment in and of itself is a morally abhorrent thing. We beg to oppose.
Okay. Thank the member of opposition for that speech.
One thing we think is lacking in animals, in what humans are giving animals in status quo, is freedom. And we think that no matter how good you make the safari look, no matter how nice you make the zoos, we don't think that you will ever be able to give these animals freedom. And why is this freedom important? We see that any form of a good food or any form of a good environment that you create in a zoo, in an artificial environment, is worthless if these animals are unable to actually live in the wild, are actually able to interact with the ecosystem and live a natural life, right? So first, a few rebuttals to cite closing opposition speech just now. So he talked about how the general public is being very desensitized towards the welfare of these animals. He talked about how economies of developing countries will now be affected, and he talked about how these animals are important for animal testings and whatnot, right? But we see that the main reason, in fact, why we are so desensitized towards animals is because we don't see them as equals. When we go to the zoo and we look at them as objects, we objectify them, and we just look at them as some form of entertainment that should entertain our lives. We don't actually care about their general well-being, and therefore the whole world is generally more desensitized towards the welfare of these animals. And secondly, we see that the whole idea that it's easier for scientists to conduct scientific journals and whatever, we don't think that is more important than giving these animals rights. And furthermore, we don't think you improve the quality of these scientific journals anyways, because clearly when you put these animals into a quarantine zone where they are not actually interacting with the ecosystem, the way they behave is different, and therefore the whole quality and the whole purpose of your investigation to see how these animals interact, that all these benefits go away when you only study them in zoos. And we don't think that at the end of this day, we don't think zoos and this form of entertainment give any other tangible benefit than satisfying the needs of humans. On to my clashes. Why is it that we need to protect animals in status quo? Because that's something that all houses have been talking a lot about. We see that in the past, before humans started capturing animals, there's no need to actually provide them food, no need to provide them shelter, because they already can fend for themselves in the wild. The reason why these animals are being mistreated, the reason why these animals need to be taken care of, is because we capture them and put them in zoos, because we put them in safaris, and we don't think that would have all these harms that are being placed onto animals would ever happen if we just don't put them in these areas. Yes.
So the cost that you have to defend on your side is like a stunt to the development of human medicine and human advancement. Why is it a better cost than the supposed freedom of animals directly engaged?
Okay, fine. Even if for example, our medicine is not improved, we see that there can still be other ways. We still think that, for example, using computer simulations or whatever, it is still a better alternative. And even if the rate at which our medication can progress is slower, we think that is far better than allowing these animals to suffer in zoos, to be kept in cages just so we can use them for the benefit of ourselves. Secondly, we see that the second tangible benefit that they brought up about, like, for example, zoos or safaris, is that now humans can actually touch animals. They don't just look at animals, they can look at it live, right? We don't think this is a actual benefit of keeping these animals in these zoos, because at the end of the day, even if you provide them with proper shelter or habitat, we think you still take away these animals' instincts, and therefore you create this cycle where these animals are never being they will never be able to be released into the wild, where they will forever be dependent on humans feeding them food. They'll forever be dependent on getting protection from humans. And we see that when one day, this just creates a cycle where they can never be released into the wild without this form of survival instincts. And we see that only if these animals grow up in a natural way, in their natural habitat with their community, are they able to live properly. Okay, next. We also think that these animals, at the end of the day, why is this freedom important to these animals? We see that if we want to guarantee proper animal rights to these animals, if we want to actually care about the welfare of these animals, we see that any form of shelter that we provide for them is useless, because if we keep them in cages just for the pure entertainment, and even on that level, when side opening opposition, for example, brought the example of pandas in Malaysia in the zoo, where they are able to give birth and therefore it's all okay, right? But we see that even in that scenario, when every day they are trapped in glass cages, where people are constantly looking at them just because they are pandas, right? They constantly get eyes from humans. We see that affects the way they behave also. That affects the way that they live, because these animals are also conscious. They are also able to sense their surroundings, as all of us agree, right? So we see that at the end of the day, if we want to allow these animals to live properly, we cannot allow any form of entertainment that we take of these animals cannot be justified. And on another level, we see that why is it that entertainment is not justified? We also think that profiteering of the nature of these animals cannot be justified, because we as humans don't own these animals. We don't have the right to keep them in cages in the very first place. We just took them from their habitats and put them into cages without any consent at all. And yeah. So quick best case, worst case comparison of side opposition and side government. What is side opposition's best case scenario? Maybe they can advance medicine or whatever. They can provide these animals with a proper shelter. But we see that the psychological damage that this puts on animals, and the fact that these animals are always going to be kept in captivity, where we don't guarantee them any sort of freedom at all, is not worth it. Whereas under our side, even in the worst case scenario, if this scientific progress is slowed down, we think that's still justified. We think that's still okay if we can guarantee the freedom of these animals, if we can give these animals the proper rights and achieve proper animal rights in the long term, and if these animals can live in the wild, and the endangerment of these animals can be prevented in the very future. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Bob. Thanks, Robbie. In today's call, Bob, we here.
Government had a simple burden in this debate. They had to comparatively tell us why entertainment purpose is a wrong thing. But they chose to be against all forms of animal exploitment without telling us why humans have to pay the cost. In my debate, in my speech today, I'm going to go through a few rebuttals. Then I'm going to go on as to what I thought the clashes were. First rebuttal. So side government came out to tell you that killing animals for food is okay because they are already dead, they are not conscious, and they are okay with them being exploited in the poultry business. However, today's opposition has to say that they are already being treated badly. Like these animals are already going to be caged up. They are really going to be caged up and kept in close proximity with these other animals. And because since the side government kept on going on the fact that, oh, these animals do not consent to these animals do not have consent to being in these cages, do not have consent to being in the safaris and taking them out of this natural environment, while taking like animals such as chickens and cows out of their natural environment and caging them up, not letting them run around freely with all the other animals, and like keeping chickens cooped up and ducks cooped up in these little cages transported to places, is also exploiting them. And they also still don't have the consent to, because since this whole debate is all about consent, which side animal gives consent, they're still not giving consent to be cooped up in this tiny cage just for the purpose of being slaughtered at the end of the day. My second rebuttal, so the side government came here to say that they are okay with having pets because they are docile, they are not meant to be out in the wild. But having pets such as birds, having pets such as fish is also a bad thing, because see, birds are meant to fly around freely. So you keeping them in cages is also a bad thing. Since you're going to talk about consent, keeping birds in cages and keeping fishes in aquariums in small little places is also going against, no thank you, is also going against the fact of they are not consenting to these things. Some dogs are tied up on leashes all day because just because their owners don't really care about them, don't really allow them to run around free. So this is also not having animal consent, if that's what you want to argue about. Thirdly, they came out to say, this came out in closing government, they came out to say that, oh, you could have this thing when my member of opposition POI'd them about having having animal testings for drugs to cure cancer, or to find like this miracle pill to help cure cancer or cure AIDS. They said no, they're not okay with that, because they said you could do alternatives such as computer simulation. Not that you can't test a drug on computer simulation. You have to test them on either either humans or maybe now in this case animals. So you can't come out and say that, oh yeah, computer simulation is going to somehow find and achieve this miracle pill to help cure cancer, to help cure AIDS, because computers aren't humans. So okay, so that is not valid. So now moving on to my issue in this debate. Which side better benefits animals in the long run? So my member of opposition came out to tell you on this very good explanation on how conservations lack funding, and that people now are desensitized by videos that PETA or WWF put out. Because now people are tending to see a lot of the same videos and the same things. People don't really care as much. People are not really drawn to these things. They'll be like, oh yeah, I just seen this video of this, elephant being abused 100 times. I don't really give a shit about that. So the only way to bring people in, to make people care more about this, is by having these form of entertainments, because people like to buy into this entertainment industry. People like to go on night safaris, people like to go see a circus show. So these conservations who are lacking funding, they can only receive these funding through these forms of entertainment. Because, for example, like she already pointed out, not all zoos are evil. Some zoos do donate to the conservations. No, thank you, I'll take you later. Some zoos do donate to the conservations. So if the zoos aren't getting these amount of fundings, how are they going to help the conservations? How are they going to further enhance these, further better these animals' lives? Because we are willing to trade off the fact that yes, maybe like two elephants would be cooped up in their little, their little area in the zoo. However, these two elephants' lives, we are willing to trade off, because it will benefit like 20 other elephants out there in the wild who can't, who are living a difficult life, because they can't, these people can't help them with their proper medical care, can't help them, to help them, reproduce. So these animals are going to end up being endangered in your world compared to ours, because now they won't have proper medical care to help them, reproduce, or to help them if they have a certain illness, they can't come out of it, and they're going to often die in your world, and they're going to become endangered and extinct. Take a seat, I'll take you later. So as pointed out earlier, the zoos aren't completely evil, because these conservations need these funding to help further benefit the lives of many other animals out there. And we are willing to trade off the lives of just a few animals if in the long run we're going to benefit a large group of people. And so the money received from these forms of entertainment would then be donated to these sort of conservations, and it would then increase fundings and help benefit more animals. move.
So
Sure,
I
sure.
find your argument about awareness really ridiculous, because when you use animal as a form of entertainment, what you really think is the fun you are having and not the entity that's being harmed in the process of that entertainment. So how are they going to be concerned about the welfare of these animals?
Say, okay, just say for example, you're trying to say that, oh, they're not going to be concerned. But in your world, if you're going to completely ban, if you're going to completely ban, if you're going to completely ban animal entertainment, then all these conservations who want to help these animals won't receive the funding that they can. So now in your world, the conservations are going to decrease in numbers. More animals are going to be more extinct. More animals are going to be more endangered, because now they can't receive the help that they need. Because in your world, you're going to put a ban on all form of entertainment, which is now like their main source of funding. And then later on, my member of opposition came to tell you a little bit on how developing countries' economy will suffer, because currently now in the developing countries, their economy is highly relied on tourism, because these countries such as South Africa are popular for their safaris. So like if you're going to suddenly put a strict ban, because let me point out, they didn't bring out a policy. So if you're going to suddenly put on a strict ban on all these animal entertainment such as safaris, these developing countries are then going to suffer, because now they wouldn't be having any form of tourism. Like less people are going to go and visit places like South Africa and go for their safaris, because now there isn't a form of entertainment. So why should I go there, and why should I go invest my money in there, and their economy is going to suffer? So for all this, I'm very, very happy to oppose.
Right, thank you. All teams, first floor, shake hands, get outside, line with the
Thank you.
Good job. It's so well. Thank you. Good job.